The velvet rope felt heavier than it should have. My fingers traced the brass clasp of my grandmother's clutch purse. Genuine leather from 1952. One of 3 items I still owned that proved my family hadn't always lived paycheck to paycheck. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper soft as a whisper, sat the ring. Platinum band. 3 small diamonds arranged like promises someone had once believed in. Worth maybe $800 if the pawnbroker on 5th Street had been honest. Worth salvation if the dealer at the Silver Monarch was feeling generous. I adjusted the strap of my department store dress. Black, modest, the kind that made invisible women more invisible, and stepped through the brass-framed entrance of the Silver Monarch Casino. The blast of refrigerated air hit my skin like a slap, raising goosebumps along my bare arms. I should have brought a cardigan, but the only one I owned had a hole near the elbow, and some humiliations were too visible to bear. The casino floor stretched before me like a glittering trap. Slot machines chimed their electronic songs of false hope. Dealers in crisp white shirts shuffled cards with the mechanical precision of people who had perfected the art of taking money from desperate fools. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, each one probably worth more than my mother's entire course of chemotherapy. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd come to a place designed to drain bank accounts, hoping to fill the one I'd already emptied. My phone buzzed in my purse. I didn't need to check it to know it was the hospital billing department. 3rd call this week. I'd stopped answering after the first one, when the woman with the professionally sympathetic voice had explained that payment plans required a minimum deposit of $2,000. Might as well have asked me for the moon. I moved deeper into the casino, past couples in evening wear who looked like they'd wandered in from a different century, from a different world where money was something that accumulated rather than evaporated. A woman in a red dress laughed at something her companion said, her hand resting on his arm with the casual confidence of someone who had never calculated whether she could afford both groceries and gas in the same week. The envelope crinkled in my purse as I walked. I'd almost left it at home, but paranoia had won out. Inside were the documents my mother had finally shown me last night, her hands trembling as she'd passed them across her hospital bed. Birth certificates, a marriage license, property deeds from a house I'd never seen, all bearing the name Ashford in swooping official script. "Keep them safe," she'd whispered, her voice reed thin from the medications. "They're all we have left of him." Him, my father, Gregory Ashford, the man who'd walked out when I was 12, leaving nothing but questions and a last name my mother had insisted we stop using. We'd become the Winters family after that. Her maiden name, a fresh start, a way to forget the man who'd forgotten us first. Except apparently, he hadn't left. Not the way I'd believed for 15 years. Mom's confession had come in fragments, broken by tears and morphine haze. Something about danger, about protection, about keeping us safe by making us disappear. She'd promised to tell me everything once she was stronger. The doctor said she might have 3 months, maybe 6 if the new treatment worked. Either way, time had become a currency I couldn't afford. I found the private jewelry buyer's booth in the back corner of the casino, tucked between the high-limit poker room and a hallway marked "Authorized Personnel Only." A discreet brass plaque read, "Luxury Appraisals, by appointment." I didn't have an appointment. I had a ring, a lie about it being a gift I wanted to sell for a vacation, and exactly $12 in my checking account. The booth's red velvet curtain was drawn. I raised my hand to knock when a voice behind me made me freeze. "Looking for Dimitri?" I turned to find a man in a dark suit studying me with the kind of attention that made my stomach clench. Not threatening, exactly. More assessing. Like he was calculating my worth and finding it wanting. Security, probably. The expensive kind that casinos hire to spot cheaters and escort out the desperate. I wanted to have something appraised, I managed, forcing my voice steady. "Dimitri's on break. Won't be back for 20 minutes. His gaze flickered to my clutch purse, then back to my face. "You can wait at the bar if you'd like. First drink's free for guests waiting for services." It wasn't really an offer. The way he angled his body toward the main floor made it clear I was expected to move along, to stop lurking in the shadows where high rollers conducted their expensive business. I nodded and turned away, my cheeks burning. Of course, they could tell I didn't belong here. Probably thought I'd stolen whatever I was trying to sell. People like me didn't wear grandmother's clutch purses and department store dresses into places like the Silver Monarch unless we were cleaning the toilets or serving drinks. The bar was predictably opulent. Black marble, gold fixtures, crystal glasses that caught light and scattered it like captured stars. I slid onto a stool at the far end, away from the cluster of men in expensive suits who were laughing too loudly at jokes that probably weren't funny. The bartender, a woman about my age with perfect makeup and a name tag reading Claire, appeared with a practiced smile. "What can I get you?" "Just water, please." Her smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes shifted. Pity, maybe, or recognition. One service worker identifying another, someone who knew the weight of bills that outnumbered paychecks. Water and lime, coming up. She moved away, and I set my purse on the bar, trying to look like someone who belonged. Someone who had chosen to be here rather than been forced by circumstances that had slowly tightened around my throat for the past 3 years. That's when I felt it. The envelope, no longer pressing against my side. My hand dove into my purse, fingers scrambling past the tissue-wrapped ring, the expired lipstick, the receipt for Mom's prescriptions. The envelope was gone. Ice flooded my veins. I'd had it when I walked in. I remembered adjusting my purse by the entrance, feeling the weight of it. Had it fallen out when I'd turned to talk to the security guard? When I'd walked across the casino floor? I stood so abruptly the bar stool scraped against marble with a sound like a scream. Claire looked up from where she was slicing lime, concern crossing her features. "Is everything okay?" "I dropped something. I didn't finish the sentence. Just grabbed my purse and headed back the way I'd come, scanning the carpet with growing desperation. Those documents were the only proof I had of who my family really was. Mom's insurance was under Winters. Her bank accounts, her medical records, all under the name we'd used for 15 years. Without those papers, without proof of the Ashford name, I couldn't access the trust fund she'd mentioned in her morphine-addled confession. Couldn't prove I was the daughter of the man who'd apparently left us something more than abandonment. The envelope wasn't by the jewelry buyer's booth, wasn't along the path I'd walked. I retraced my steps to the entrance, my heart hammering against my ribs hard enough to hurt. A janitor was sweeping near the brass doors. I hurried over. "Excuse me, did you find an envelope? White, about this big." I gestured with shaking hands. He shook his head without looking up. "Try lost and found. 3rd floor, guest services." "Guest services." Of course. I'd have to give my name, my information. Would they even give it back to me if they found it? Would they ask questions about documents that bore a different last name than the one on my driver's license? I was still standing frozen in indecision when the sound of my name, my real name, echoed across the casino floor. Temperance Ashford. The voice was male, deep, with an edge that made it less a question and more a summons. I turned slowly, my body moving on instinct while my mind struggled to catch up. He stood near the entrance to a corridor I hadn't noticed before, partially shadowed by an ornamental column. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it had been tailored specifically for his frame. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and controlled intensity. But it was his eyes that held me frozen. Storm gray, fixed on me with an expression I couldn't read. Not recognition exactly, something more complicated. Something that looked almost like shock. In his hand, he held a white envelope. My envelope. "That's mine," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. I dropped it. He didn't move, didn't extend the envelope toward me, just continued to stare as though seeing something that shouldn't exist, something that defied every law of probability he'd ever known. Ashford, he repeated. And this time it wasn't a question at all. Gregory Ashford's daughter. The world tilted. How did he know my father's name? How did he know anything about me at all? Who are you? I managed. Something flickered across his face, too quick to interpret, too complex to name. When he finally spoke again, his voice had dropped to something almost reverent, almost afraid. I'm the man your father saved, and I'm the man who's been looking for his family for 15 years. The private office he led me to smelled of leather and old money, the kind that didn't come from lottery tickets or lucky breaks, but from generation after generation of knowing exactly how to take what they wanted. I stood just inside the door, clutch purse pressed against my stomach like a shield. While Everett Crane, he'd introduced himself in the elevator with the formality of someone closing a business deal, circled behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of mahogany. He set my envelope down precisely in the center of the desk. Didn't open it. Didn't need to. Whatever he'd seen when he'd picked it up off the casino floor had been enough. Sit, he said, gesturing to one of 2 leather chairs positioned across from him. I remained standing, some instinct, the same one that had kept me employed in 3 different jobs while putting myself through community college, told me that sitting would be a concession, the first of many he'd expect. I'd rather have my documents and go, I said. Thank you for finding them. The corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. You came here to sell jewelry, to Dimitri. I'm guessing you need money quickly, or you wouldn't be in a casino at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. The specificity of his observation felt like a hand closing around my throat. He'd been watching, or had someone watching for him. The security guard who'd redirected me to the bar, had that been intentional? A way to keep me in place while someone brought this man my lost envelope? That's my business, I said. It became my business the moment I saw the name Ashford on a property deed dated 1995. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. Gregory Ashford. Owned a house in Riverside. Married to Vivian Hayes in 1990. 1 daughter, born 1998. You. My fingers tightened on my purse. You went through my documents. I memorized them in approximately 30 seconds. His voice remained level, almost casual, like we were discussing the weather rather than my private family history. Question is, why does Gregory Ashford's daughter need to pawn jewelry at a casino instead of accessing the trust fund he set up for his family? What trust fund? The words escaped before I could stop them. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite surprise, but something adjacent to it. He didn't tell you. He left when I was 12. The old lie came automatically, the story I'd told myself for 15 years. Haven't seen him since. Everett was silent for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made me want to look away. I forced myself to hold his gaze, to not show the fear that was slowly creeping up my spine like frost. Your father saved my life, he said finally. May 7th, 2010. I was 21 years old, stupid, and in over my head with people who didn't negotiate. Gregory was meeting with my uncle about a land deal. Wrong place, wrong time. When Sergei Volkov's men came for me, your father stepped between us. He paused. He took 3 bullets, died before the ambulance arrived. The office tilted. I reached for the back of the leather chair, my leg suddenly unreliable. Dead. Not missing. Not abandoning us. Dead. That's not... I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't reconcile the story my mother had told. That he'd left. That he'd chosen a different life. With this version where he'd died protecting a stranger. My mother said he left us. Your mother said what I told her to say. A new voice, elderly and rough as gravel, came from the doorway. I turned to find an older man, maybe 70, with silver hair and a face mapped with scars that suggested a long history of surviving things that should have killed him. He wore a suit similar to Everett's, but with an old-world elegance that made him look like he'd stepped out of a 1940s photograph. "Uncle Dominic," Everett said, and though his tone remained respectful, something in the way he said it suggested this wasn't a family relationship based on blood. "I didn't call for you yet. You found the Ashford girl. You think I wouldn't hear?" The old man's gaze fixed on me with an assessment that felt like being x-rayed. "She looks like him. Same stubborn chin. Same eyes that don't know when to stop looking." "Sit down, Miss Ashford," Everett said again. And this time I did, because my legs had stopped being reliable. Dominic moved into the office with careful steps, settling into the other leather chair with a sigh that spoke of old injuries and older regrets. "Your father wasn't supposed to be there that day. Was meeting me about selling a piece of property, trying to liquidate assets for his family. Said he wanted to make sure you and your mother were provided for if anything happened." His weathered hand lifted in a gesture toward Everett. "Then Volkov's crew showed up. 5 of them. Your father was unarmed. Didn't matter. He saw a kid about to die, and he moved. The tissue-wrapped ring in my purse suddenly felt impossibly heavy. All those years thinking he'd abandoned us, that he'd chosen something else over his family, and he'd been dead. Protecting someone else's family because that's who he'd been. The kind of man who stepped in front of bullets for strangers. Why didn't you tell us?" My voice came out broken. "Why let us think he'd left?" "Because Volkov didn't die that day," Everett said quietly. "His brother did. 2 of his cousins. When Sergei realized Gregory wasn't connected to my family, that he was just a civilian in the wrong place, it made him even angrier. Random chance. Random death. Sergei swore he'd find Gregory's family, make them pay for the humiliation of his brother's death at a civilian's hands. So I told your mother that Gregory was in witness protection," Dominic continued. "That he'd had to disappear to keep you all safe. That changing her name, moving, leaving no trail, that was the only way to protect you and the girl. She believed me because she wanted to believe he'd chosen to protect you, even from a distance." "But he was already dead," I said numbly. "Already dead," Dominic confirmed. "And Sergei Volkov was very much alive. Spent the next 3 years looking for Gregory's family. By the time he gave up, your mother had built a new life as Vivian Winters. You were in school under a different name. Clean break. Safe. Until now." Everett's voice cut through the heavy silence. "Sergei retired to Miami in 2018. Died last year. Natural causes, surprisingly. His nephew Anton took over the organization. And Anton has a memory like a filing cabinet. When one of my men, being careless, ran a background check on you last week, it pinged in Anton's network. The world crystallized into sharp, terrible focus. You've been watching me." "For 6 days," Everett confirmed. "Since Anton's people started asking questions about a Temperance Winters who used to be a Temperance Ashford. Since they connected you to the man who killed 3 Volkovs 15 years ago. I didn't kill anyone. My father was protecting what's mine." Everett leaned forward, his gray eyes holding mine with an intensity that felt like being pinned by light. "Which makes his family my responsibility. A debt I've carried for 15 years. A debt I finally have the chance to repay." "I don't want your money," I said automatically. "Not offering money." He reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a photograph, slid it across the polished wood toward me. "I'm offering protection. Because as of yesterday, Anton Volkov knows where you live, where you work, where your mother is receiving treatment." The photograph showed my mother's hospital, the entrance I used every evening. But it wasn't taken from the parking lot or the street. It was taken from inside, from the hallway on her floor, from outside her room. My mother's room number, clearly visible on the door. 3:21. The date stamp in the corner read, yesterday. 2:34 p.m. The exact time I'd been at work, serving coffee to people who didn't tip. How did they... I couldn't finish the question. Didn't need to. Anton's people are thorough, Dominic said, and patient. They've been watching you longer than we have, probably since Everett's man ran that background check. So what do I do? The question came out small, defeated. Nothing like the voice I'd used to negotiate payment plans with hospital billing departments, to explain to landlords why rent would be 3 days late. Go to the police? Everett's laugh was soft and utterly without humor. And tell them what? That the nephew of a dead Russian mobster might be interested in you? That you have photos of a public hospital? They'd file a report and send you home. 24 hours later, your mother would die in her sleep. Medical complication. Very tragic. Very common in cancer patients. Then what? My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. What are you offering? What your father couldn't give you. Everett stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and clean. Safety, resources, a chance to focus on your mother's health instead of selling your grandmother's jewelry to pay for treatments that insurance won't cover. In exchange for what? For letting me fulfill a promise I made to a dying man. His voice dropped. Gregory's last words were, "Take care of them." I didn't know who they were. Didn't know he had a family until today. Now I do. And I don't break promises, Miss Ashford. Especially not ones made in blood. I don't need... Yes, you do. He pulled out his phone, tapped something, then turned the screen toward me. It showed a payment confirmation. Memorial General Hospital. Patient, Vivian Winters. Balance, $0. You are 0. I already paid it, Everett said simply. All of it, including the experimental treatment her oncologist wants to try. The one your insurance company denied 3 times. I couldn't breathe. The number at the bottom of the screen, $47. All 0. Represented more than I'd earned in 2 years. Represented every sleepless night, every declined credit card, every humiliation of explaining to medical professionals that I would pay. I would find a way. Just please, don't stop treating her. I didn't ask you to do that. Your father didn't ask permission to die for me. Everett pocketed his phone. Consider it the first installment on a debt I'll never be able to fully repay. And the rest? I forced myself to ask. What do you expect from me? For now, move into a property I own. Secure building, 24-hour security. All expenses paid. Let me assign someone to watch your mother's hospital room. And... He paused, something almost apologetic crossing his features. Stop working at the diner. Anton knows you're there. Makes you too vulnerable. I need that job. Not anymore. The presumption in those 3 words lit a spark of anger in my chest, burning through the numbness. You don't get to just rearrange my entire life because you feel guilty. I don't feel guilty, Everett said, his voice hardening. I feel responsible. There's a difference. And whether you accept my protection willingly or not, you're getting it. Because the alternative, letting Anton Volkov settle a 15-year-old grudge by hurting you and your mother, isn't something I can allow. Can't allow. I stood, purse clutched against my chest. You don't own me. No. His eyes met mine, storm gray and absolutely certain. But I owe you. And I always pay my debts, Miss Ashford. Always. The weight of his certainty, of his absolute conviction that he had the right to upend my entire existence because of something my father had done 15 years ago, pressed down on my shoulders like physical force. I need to think, I managed. Think fast. Dominic's rough voice cut in. Anton's people are probably watching the casino right now, waiting to see where you go when you leave. Unless you want them following you back to that apartment with the broken lock on Maple Street, I suggest you start making decisions. They knew where I lived, knew about the broken lock I'd been meaning to fix for 2 months, had probably been inside, looked through my things, cataloged every vulnerability and weakness they could exploit. How long? I asked. How long do I have to decide? Everett checked his watch. Platinum, simple, probably worth more than my car. Dimitri's shift at the jewelry window ends in 40 minutes. I'll have him buy your grandmother's ring. Full appraisal value plus 20%. That should give you enough to feel like you made the decision yourself. His gaze locked with mine. But after that, Miss Ashford, you're getting in a car with people I trust. Whether it's because you want to or because you're smart enough to know you don't have another choice is up to you. Not a request. Not even really an offer. Just a statement of fact, delivered by a man who'd spent 15 years building an empire that could protect what he considered his. And apparently, thanks to my father's sacrifice, I'd just become something he considered his to protect. The apartment Everett's people moved me into wasn't an apartment at all. It was a fortress disguised as luxury. 23rd floor of a building that required 3 separate security clearances just to reach the elevator. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Kitchen appliances I didn't know how to operate. A bathroom larger than my entire previous living space. I stood in the center of the living room, still holding my grandmother's clutch purse, now containing $840 from the ring sale, plus the documents Everett had returned, and tried to process how my life had been completely reorganized in the span of 4 hours. The building has a doorman 24/7, the woman who'd escorted me up was saying. Her name was Irina, mid-40s, with silver-threaded dark hair, and the kind of alertness that suggested she'd been hired for more than her ability to carry luggage. Groceries can be delivered directly to your unit. There's a gym on the 15th floor, pool on the roof. Mr. Crane has arranged for anything you need to be billed to his account. I can pay for my own groceries, I said automatically. Irina's expression didn't change. Of course. The option is simply available if you prefer. After she left, I walked through the apartment slowly, cataloging its impossible luxuries. The bed was king-sized with sheets that felt like water under my fingertips. The closet was walk-in, currently empty except for a note on embossed cardstock. Clothing allowance arranged. Contact Irina for stylist appointment. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, then retrieved it, smoothed it out, and set it on the dresser, because refusing to use resources out of pride when my mother needed those resources for survival was a luxury I couldn't afford. My phone rang. The hospital. I answered with hands that had started shaking again. Miss Winters? This is Dr. Chen. I wanted to inform you that we've scheduled your mother for the CAR T-cell therapy we discussed. First treatment is tomorrow morning. Tomorrow. The treatment they'd said would take weeks to arrange. That insurance would never approve. That would cost more than I'd earn in 5 years. Thank you, I managed. I'll be there. After the call ended, I stood at the window watching the city lights blur through tears. I hadn't given myself permission to cry. Everett Crane had done more for my mother in 4 hours than I'd been able to do in 3 years of destroying myself trying to keep her alive, and I hated him for it. Hated the ease with which his money solved problems that had been slowly crushing me. Hated that accepting his help felt like admitting I'd failed. The knock at the door was soft but unmistakable. I checked the peephole, apartment complex security protocol I'd learned in less secure buildings, and found Everett standing in the hallway, now dressed more casually in dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Still expensive, still tailored, but somehow more human than the intimidating figure from his office. I opened the door, but didn't step back. Didn't invite him in. I wanted to check that everything was acceptable, he said. His gaze flickered past me to the apartment interior, then back to my face. Irina said you seemed comfortable with the arrangements. Comfortable is an interesting word choice for prisoner in a luxury cell. His jaw tightened slightly. the first crack in his composed exterior I'd seen since the casino. "You're not a prisoner. I can't go to work. Can't go to my old apartment without supervision. Can't visit my mother without one of your people following me." I kept my voice level. "What would you call that? Protected. Without my consent. Your father didn't wait for consent before stepping in front of those bullets." The words came out harder than he'd probably intended. I watched him take a breath, visibly controlling himself. "I'm sorry. That was true." I stepped back, finally letting him enter. Not because I wanted his company, but because having this conversation in a doorway felt too much like a servant speaking to her employer. "Tell me what really happened that day. Not the sanitized version. The truth." Everett moved to the windows, keeping careful distance between us. His reflection in the glass looked tired in a way his actual face didn't show. I was trying to prove myself. Uncle Dominic ran the organization after my father died, and I thought I needed to make power moves to earn respect. So I started negotiations with a construction company that had ties to Volkov's territory. Stupid. Reckless. Exactly the kind of thing that gets young idiots killed. But you didn't get killed. Because Gregory Ashford was meeting Dominic about selling a rental property. Some investment he'd made that hadn't paid off, needed liquidity for his family. He was in the outer office when Volkov's crew came through the door. Everett turned from the window, and for the first time I saw something raw in his expression. Something that looked like guilt, worn smooth by 15 years of carrying it. They didn't announce themselves, didn't ask questions, just started shooting. I was in Dominic's office, trapped. "Your father..." He stopped, his hands flexing at his sides. When he continued, his voice was rougher. I watched through the door crack. He saw what was happening, saw me cornered. Had maybe 3 seconds to decide. He could have run, should have run. Instead, he walked toward the gunfire. No weapon, no backup. Just a civilian who decided someone's son mattered more than his own safety. The image formed in my mind with terrible clarity. My father, who'd taught me to ride a bike and read maps and calculate compound interest, walking toward armed men, choosing to die for a stranger because that's who he'd been, someone who couldn't stand by when someone else was in danger. "The police report said it was a robbery," I said quietly. "That my father was a victim of random violence. Dominic has connections with the police department, made sure the report reflected that story, made sure there was no reason for anyone to look deeper, to connect it to family business." Everett's gaze held mine. "Made sure your father looked like a hero, rather than someone caught in the crossfire of an organization war. Which he was. A hero, I mean, in every sense that matters." I sank onto the pristine white sofa, suddenly exhausted. "My mother. She knows he's dead. She knows. Dominic told her 3 days after it happened. Paid for the funeral. Arranged for the burial. Put money in an account for you and your mother. Not as much as I would have. Not as much as it should have been. But enough to keep you comfortable. She refused to touch it. Because she thought it was blood money. Because she thought accepting it would keep you in danger," Everett corrected. "Dominic told her that Gregory had made enemies, that those enemies might come looking for his family, that the best protection was to disappear. New name, new city, no connection to Gregory Ashford or anyone who'd known him. Except you never stopped looking for us." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite surprise, but recognition that I'd understood something important. "I asked Dominic every year, did we find them? Are they safe? Did Gregory's daughter get to grow up without knowing her father died because of me?" He moved to the chair across from the sofa, sitting with careful precision. "Every year, he told me the same thing, that they were protected by distance and anonymity, that trying to find them would put them at risk, that the best way to honor Gregory's sacrifice was to let his family live in peace. Until that background check. Until one of my newer employees, trying to be thorough on a routine security screening, ran your old name through a database that Anton's people monitor. His hands tightened on the arms of the chair. I had 3 of my best people working to bury that information within an hour. But by then, Anton had already seen it. Already connected the dots. Already started making plans. To hurt me, I said. Not a question. To hurt me, Everett corrected. By taking something I owe everything to protect. Anton doesn't care about 15-year-old grudges. But he cares about power, about showing that crossing the Volkovs, even accidentally, even a decade and a half ago, has consequences. The calculation behind it was chilling. I wasn't a person to Anton Volkov. I was a message, a demonstration that debts never expired in his world. So what are the terms, I asked, of this protection? What do you expect from me? Everett leaned back, studying me with an intensity that made me feel exposed. Expect? Nothing. You're not an employee or an obligation to be managed. You're someone I owe a debt to that I can never fully repay. Everyone expects something. All right. He pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped something, then set it on the coffee table between us. The screen showed a document, a contract of some kind. These are the terms. Read them. Challenge anything you don't agree with. This is a negotiation, Miss Ashford, not a dictate. I picked up the phone, scrolling through what appeared to be a formal protection agreement. The language was precise, almost clinical. Subject, Temperance Ashford, agrees to reside in secured property for duration of threat assessment period. All living expenses covered by provider, Everett Crane. Medical expenses for subject and immediate family covered in perpetuity. Perpetuity is a long time, I said. Your mother has cancer. Perpetuity is how long treatment might take. I kept reading. Subject maintains right to employment of her choosing, with security provisions. Subject may terminate agreement at any time with 48-hour notice. I can leave, just like that? You're not a prisoner, Everett said again. You're someone being protected. If you decide that protection isn't worth the restrictions, you can walk away. I won't stop you. But you won't stop Anton either. His expression darkened. Anton is being addressed through separate channels. This agreement is about making sure you're safe while that situation resolves itself. Resolves itself. That's a polite way of saying someone's going to die. Anton made a choice to pursue a vendetta against a dead man's family. Whatever consequences that brings are his own doing. I set the phone down. I want to add terms. I'm listening. I want to keep my job at the diner. I know you said it's not safe, but I searched for the right words. I need something that's mine. Something that doesn't come from you or your debt, or my father's sacrifice. Can you make it safe? Everett was quiet for a long moment. I can have someone buy the diner, new ownership, new security protocols. You keep working there, but with protections in place that don't compromise your sense of independence. Would that be acceptable? You'd buy an entire diner so I could keep a waitressing job? I'd buy 10 diners if that's what it takes for you to feel like you still have control over your own life. His voice was absolutely serious. This isn't about control, Temperance. It's about debt, about honor, about being able to look at myself in the mirror and know I finally did what your father's last words asked me to do. The use of my first name felt intimate, in a way his formality hadn't. I looked at the contract again, at the careful legal language that was trying to define something that couldn't be quantified. I want to visit my mother every day, without feeling like I'm being guarded. I'll assign someone you trust. You choose the person. If you don't trust anyone I offer, we keep trying until you do. And when this is over? When Anton isn't a threat anymore? Then you decide what happens next. Stay in the apartment or move out. Keep the medical coverage or transfer to your own insurance. Maintain contact with me, or disappear into a life where I'm just someone who once knew your father. He leaned forward, his gaze holding mine. I meant what I said. You're not a prisoner. You're not an investment. You're the daughter of a man who saved my life. And that means you get to choose your own path. I'm just trying to make sure you survive long enough to walk it. The exhaustion that had been building all day finally crested. I was so tired of being strong, tired of calculating whether I could afford both gas and groceries, tired of watching my mother slowly die because I couldn't earn money fast enough to save her. I'll sign, I said, with my additions about the job and choosing my own security. I'll have my lawyer add the amendments tonight. You'll have a new contract in the morning. Everett stood, moving toward the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. Your father was the best person I never got to know. I hope you know that. I don't know anything anymore, I admitted, except that the man I thought abandoned me actually died protecting someone else's family, which means I've been hating a hero for 15 years. He would have forgiven you. Everett's voice was soft. He forgave me for putting him in that position in the first place. That's what heroes do. After he left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching the city lights and thinking about sacrifice, about the different ways people paid debts, about how my father had given his life in 3 seconds, and how Everett Crane was spending 15 years trying to earn the right to be worth that sacrifice. Tomorrow, I would visit my mother and try to explain why our entire world had changed overnight, why the man we'd thought abandoned us had actually saved us in the only way he knew how, why I'd just agreed to let a stranger upend my life because refusing would be an insult to my father's memory. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I would sleep in a bed where I didn't have to calculate the cost of comfort, where I didn't have to choose between safety and survival. It felt like betrayal and salvation all at once. The hospital room smelled the same, antiseptic and resignation, with an underlying note of flowers that were already wilting in their plastic vase. Mom was awake when I arrived, her skin paper-thin against the white pillows, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in weeks. The new treatment was working, or at least it was fighting. You changed your hair, she said, her voice still reedy but stronger. More mom than the morphine shadow she'd become. I hadn't changed my hair. I'd just washed it with shampoo that cost more than my old weekly grocery budget, blown it dry with a dryer that belonged in a salon. The difference was visible enough that she'd noticed. Things have changed, I said, pulling the visitor chair close to her bed. Behind me, in the hallway, I could feel Irina's presence. She'd driven me here, walked 3 steps behind me through the parking garage, positioned herself where she could watch both the door and the window. Not intrusive. Just there, a constant reminder that my life wasn't entirely my own anymore. Changed how? Mom's eyes, still sharp despite the illness ravaging her body, tracked my expression, reading the truth before I could figure out how to frame it. So I told her. Not everything. Not the details about Anton Volkov or the threats, or the men who'd photographed her hospital room door. But enough. About the documents. About meeting Everett. About learning that Gregory Ashford hadn't abandoned us at all. She cried. Silently, tears tracking down her hollow cheeks while her hand gripped mine with surprising strength. I wanted to tell you, she whispered. So many times. But Dominic said, keeping you away, keeping you angry at your father, was the only way to keep you safe. If you hated Gregory, you'd never try to find him. Never ask questions that would lead back to that world. You let me hate him for 15 years. I let you stay alive for 15 years. Her grip tightened. Do you understand, Temperance? If Volkov's people had found us then, when you were 12. She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I understood. Had understood it the moment Everett showed me the photograph of her hospital door. Some safety required sacrifice. Even the sacrifice of the truth. The treatment is working, I said, changing the subject to something that didn't feel like standing on the edge of an abyss. Dr. Chen said your numbers are improving, because someone paid for it. Not a question. Mom had always been good at math, at calculating what was possible versus what required miracles. Who? Everett Crane, the man Dad saved. I watched her face carefully. He says it's a debt. Debts in that world come with strings. He wrote a contract. I can show you. It's actually very clear about what's expected, which is essentially nothing except letting him keep us safe until the threat is gone. Threats don't just go away in that world, sweetheart. Mom's eyes closed briefly, exhaustion pulling at her. They multiply. Or they get temporarily controlled until the next one emerges. So what was I supposed to do? Say no and watch you die because I was too proud to accept help? No. Her eyes opened again, meeting mine with the fierce love that had kept her fighting for 3 years, past what doctors said was possible. You were supposed to do exactly what you did. Survive. Whatever it takes. That's what your father would have wanted. After visiting hours ended, Irina drove me back to the fortress apartment in a black sedan that probably cost more than my mother's house. We didn't speak. I'd learned that Irina wasn't chatty, just competent. She drove like someone who'd learned in Moscow winters, navigated traffic like someone running calculations 3 moves ahead. You don't have to walk me to the door, I said when we reached the building. Mr. Crane's instructions are clear. She pulled into the underground parking garage, using a key card that opened gates I hadn't known existed. You're accompanied door to door. The apartment felt both familiar and alien after just one night. My few possessions, clothes I'd grabbed from my old place, Mom's photograph, the documents that had started everything, looked lost in all the expensive emptiness. I was standing at the window, watching the city pretend to sleep, when my phone rang. Everett. I need to show you something, he said without preamble. May I come up? 5 minutes later, he was at my door with a tablet and an expression I couldn't quite read. Grim, maybe. Or the particular kind of angry that comes from being proven right about something you'd hoped to be wrong about. Anton made his move, Everett said, pulling up security footage on the tablet. 2 hours ago. Your old apartment building. The video showed 3 men I didn't recognize. Professional, efficient, moving through my former hallway like they owned it. One of them picked the lock on what had been my door with practiced ease. They were inside for maybe 10 minutes before emerging and disappearing down the stairwell. What were they looking for? You. They didn't know you'd moved. Everett swiped to another video, this one from inside what had been my apartment. They left this. The image showed my small living room, now thoroughly ransacked. Drawers emptied, cushions slashed. And on the wall above the thrift store couch, someone had spray-painted a message in Russian. Everett didn't need to translate. The meaning was clear enough in the savage simplicity of it. It says debts paid in blood, he said quietly. Anton's family motto. I sank onto the sofa, staring at the image of my destroyed home. If I'd been there, you weren't. That's what matters. Everett set the tablet down, moving to the kitchen. I heard water running, the soft clink of glass on marble. He returned with 2 glasses of water, offering one. Drink. You're pale. I'm terrified. There's a difference. Terror is a reasonable response to men breaking into your home. He sat across from me, careful distance maintained. But you're not there. You're here, where Anton can't reach you without starting a war he's not ready to fight. How comforting, I'm safe because I'm valuable leverage. You're safe because your father saved my life and I don't break promises. He took a sip of his water, watching me over the rim of the glass. There's a difference. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the city continued its endless humming. Inside, I calculated the impossible mathematics of my new life. Safe, but controlled. Protected, but constrained. Surviving because a stranger felt he owed a debt to a dead man. Tell me about him, I said suddenly. My father. What was he like that day, before the shooting? Everett's expression shifted. Surprise, then something softer. Calm. He was talking to Dominic about property values, about school districts. Said he wanted to move you and your mother to a better neighborhood, someplace with good public schools and low crime. He had a photograph in his wallet. You and your mother at what looked like a birthday party. You were wearing a yellow dress and missing your front teeth. I remembered that dress. Remembered the party. My 11th birthday, 3 months before he died. Before my world divided into before and after. He kept talking about compound interest. Everett continued, a slight smile touching his lips. Said you were good at math, that you'd probably end up as an accountant or an analyst, that you had his head for numbers but your mother's practical sense. I ended up serving coffee. You ended up surviving. There's honor in that. The earnestness in his voice caught me off guard. This man who commanded an empire built on violence and fear, speaking about honor like it was something quantifiable, something that mattered more than power. What happens next? I asked. With Anton, with all of this. Next, we establish new parameters. Everett leaned forward, his expression shifting to something more businesslike. The diner has new ownership as of this morning. Elena Rodriguez, one of my financial managers, completely legitimate business operator. She's implementing new security without making it obvious. You can return to work next week if you still want to. I do, I figured. I also arranged for your mother to be transferred to a private care facility once she's cleared for release. Better security, better care, room for you to stay overnight if you want. More expensive. Already paid for. He held up a hand when I started to protest. This isn't charity, it's logistics. Anton can't threaten her if he can't reach her, and a hospital with 50 other patients and rotating staff is too porous. The facility I'm suggesting has single-point access, and a security team that knows what they're actually securing against. The casual way he discussed protecting my mother from murder attempts made my head spin. You're talking about turning her recovery into a fortress. I'm talking about making sure she recovers at all. His voice gentled. I know this isn't what you wanted. None of this is, but we're dealing with the reality that Anton Volkov has decided you're a useful tool to hurt me. Until he decides you're not, or until he's no longer in a position to make those decisions, we adapt. By no longer in a position, you mean... I mean he'll come to understand that pursuing this vendetta costs more than it's worth. Everett's expression was carefully neutral. How that understanding is reached isn't something you need to worry about, because I'm just the civilian, the person being protected, not consulted. Because you're Gregory Ashford's daughter, and he died so I could have a life. The least I can do is make sure you get to have yours without spending it looking over your shoulder. The knock at the door interrupted what might have become an argument. Irina appeared with another woman, younger, maybe 30, with warm brown eyes, and the kind of smile that suggested she was good at putting people at ease. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Everett said, standing. Your mother's oncologist. I asked her to stop by to explain the treatment protocol in terms you can actually understand. Dr. Chen settled into the chair Everett had vacated, pulling out a tablet. I have about 30 minutes before I need to be back at the hospital. Shall we discuss your mother's prognosis? I looked at Everett, who was already moving toward the door with Irina, giving us privacy. Making sure I had the information I needed without his presence making it feel like coercion. One more thing. he said from the doorway. "Tomorrow morning, Irina will take you to meet Dominic. He has information about your father, letters, photographs, things he saved in case we ever found you. I thought you might want them." After they left, Dr. Chen spent 28 minutes explaining cellular biology, T-cell modification, and statistical survival rates. She was thorough, honest, and hopeful in a way that felt earned rather than performative. "Bottom line," she said as she was leaving, "the treatment your mother's receiving is cutting edge. Expensive, yes, but effective. With continued therapy and barring complications, I'd say she has a very real chance of remission." Remission. The word hung in the air after she'd gone, glowing like a promise I'd stopped letting myself believe in. I stood at the window again, watching the city lights blur through tears. I finally let myself cry. My father had died protecting a stranger. That stranger was now protecting me. My mother might actually survive. And I was living in a luxury apartment while men with guns made sure no one could hurt me. It felt like salvation wearing the face of a prison, or maybe like a prison that was starting to feel like safety. I wasn't sure which frightened me more. Dominic's office was nothing like Everett's. Where the younger man favored minimalist elegance, the uncle's space was a shrine to history. Photographs lined every wall, some black and white, others faded color prints from the 70s and 80s. Men in suits from different eras, all wearing the same expression of controlled power. In the center of the largest wall hung a framed newspaper article from 2010. "Local hero dies in random shooting." "That's not the real headline," I said, staring at my father's photograph. They'd used his driver's license picture. He looked tired but smiling. I'd never seen this image before. The real headline was "Casualties in Organized Crime Dispute," Dominic said from behind his desk. His office chair was leather, old and cracked, comfortable with age. "I called in favors, made sure the story protected Gregory's memory, made sure his family wouldn't be connected to what really happened." "You erased him." "I protected him. There's a difference." Dominic opened a drawer and withdrew a large envelope, the same kind of envelope I'd lost in the casino. "These are Gregory's personal effects from that day. His wallet, his watch, some papers he had in his jacket. I kept them. Thought maybe someday I'd find his family. Give them back." I took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside, my father's wallet, worn leather, still holding his credit cards and driver's license. A watch with a cracked face, stopped at 3:47 p.m. The exact moment he'd died. And folded papers. Documents about the rental property he'd been trying to sell. A list of expenses in his handwriting. "He was organized," I said, reading through the expense list. "Mortgage payment, utilities, my school supplies. Every dollar accounted for. Even when he was dying, he was trying to take care of us. He talked about you in that waiting room, showed me the photograph in his wallet, said his daughter was good at math, that she got that from him." Dominic's weathered face softened slightly. "Said he wanted to make sure you never had to worry about money the way he had, that you'd go to college, have opportunities he didn't." I carefully returned everything to the envelope except the photograph. The one of me in the yellow dress, missing my front teeth, grinning at the camera like the world was good and safe and permanent. Mom was in the background, laughing at something out of frame. We'd been happy. I'd forgotten we'd been happy. "Everett said you've been looking for us for 15 years. "Not actively. Anton's men were looking, so we had to be quiet about it. But I had people checking occasionally. Different databases, different approaches. Your mother did a good job disappearing." He pulled out another envelope, newer. "These are letters." "Letters?" "Gregory wrote to you and your mother. Every month for the 6 months before he died. Never mailed them. Too dangerous. I found them in his apartment when we were clearing it out." Dominic slid the envelope across his desk. "Thought you should have them." I opened this envelope more slowly. Inside were 6 letters, each addressed in my father's careful handwriting. To my girls. To Vivian and Temperance. The postmark dates were never filled in. Letters meant to be sent but kept safe instead. I can't read these here, I managed. Take them. They're yours. Dominic stood, moving to the wall of photographs. Your father was a good man, Temperance. Better than most who end up in rooms where people die. He didn't belong in that world, but when it came for him, he didn't run. That takes a particular kind of courage. It takes stupidity, I said bitterly. He should have saved himself. Should have let Everett handle his own problems. Maybe. Dominic turned to face me. But then Everett would be dead. And you'd still be burying your mother because there wouldn't be anyone with the resources and the debt to help. Sometimes stupid choices have better outcomes than smart ones. The ruthless pragmatism in his voice reminded me that these men, for all their talk of honor and debt, operated by mathematics I'd never been taught. Cost-benefit analysis where the costs were measured in lives and the benefits in power. What does Everett really want from me? I asked. Beyond the debt and the protection, what's his endgame? To not be the man who let Gregory Ashford's daughter get hurt after her father died saving him. Dominic returned to his desk, his movements showing his age in a way the rest of him disguised. You think you're just an obligation to him? You're not. You're proof that what Gregory did meant something, that the sacrifice was worth it. So I'm supposed to be his absolution. You're supposed to be safe. What you choose to be beyond that, grateful, resentful, indifferent, is your business. I left Dominic's office with 2 envelopes and more questions than answers. Irina was waiting in the hallway, patient as always. We'd developed a rhythm over the past week. She drove. I pretended not to notice her constant vigilance. We didn't talk much, but the silence had become comfortable. She knew when I needed space and when I needed the small gesture of a coffee stop. Today, she drove me to the private facility where Mom was being transferred. It was beautiful in that way, expensive healthcare always managed, disguised as a luxury hotel, rather than a place where people went to either get better or die trying. Mom had a suite with a view, a private nurse, and equipment that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. This is too much, Mom said when I arrived, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in months, and her skin had color that wasn't just the flush of medication. It's what you need. I set the envelopes on her bedside table. I brought you something. From Dad. I watched her face crumple as I explained about the letters, about the wallet and watch. She held the photograph with trembling hands, tracing the outline of our younger, happier faces. He carried this everywhere, she whispered. I remember when it was taken. You'd just lost that tooth eating an apple. You were so mad because you'd wanted it to fall out at school so you could show your friends. We read the letters together. Dad's handwriting was steady, his words careful. He talked about wanting to build us a treehouse, about teaching me to drive someday, about growing old with Mom and watching me graduate college. Normal dreams from a man who'd died protecting a stranger. He loved us, Mom said, folding the last letter with shaking hands. Even knowing he was putting himself at risk working near those people, he kept trying to provide for us. That's what the property sale was about, getting enough money to move us somewhere safer. And instead, he got killed. Instead, he saved someone. Mom's hand found mine. Don't resent Everett for living, Temperance. Your father wouldn't have wanted that. But I did resent him. Not for living, exactly. For being the reason my father had been there. For carrying a debt that meant I couldn't just walk away and pretend none of this had happened. For making my survival contingent on accepting his protection, his resources, his carefully structured absolution. The resentment was still simmering when I returned to the apartment that evening to find Everett waiting in my living room. He stood when I entered, holding a folder that looked official and ominous. We need to talk, he said without preamble. Anton made another move. I set down my bag, bracing myself. What kind of move? He tried to access your mother's medical records. Hospital security stopped him, but he got close enough to confirm she's still alive, still receiving treatment. Everett's jaw was tight. He's escalating. Meaning? Meaning he's not just interested in using you as leverage. He wants to eliminate you. Remove the possibility that I could ever fulfill the debt to your father. Everett opened the folder, revealing surveillance photos. Anton Volkov was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp features and expensive clothes. He sees you as a weakness, something that makes me vulnerable. So what do you want me to do? Hide better? Disappear? I want you to understand what you're up against. Everett set the folder on the coffee table, his expression harder than I'd seen it. Anton's organization runs on reputation, on being seen as powerful enough that people don't cross him. You represent a debt that's more important to me than avoiding conflict with him. That makes me unpredictable in his eyes. Dangerous. So this is about you. This is about the fact that your father saved my life. And I won't let the consequences of that sacrifice include his daughter getting hurt. His voice rose slightly, the first time I'd heard him lose control. You want to make this about my guilt? Fine. I'm guilty. Guilty of being young and stupid and putting people in danger. Guilty of living when Gregory died. Guilty of spending 15 years building power specifically so I could protect his family if I ever found them. You think I don't know what this is costing you? Your freedom? Your privacy? Your ability to just live without looking over your shoulder? Then let me go. The words came out before I could stop them. If you really care about what I want, let me disappear again. New name, new city, no connection to you or Anton or any of this. I tried that. Everett pulled out his phone, tapped something, then showed me the screen. It displayed a dossier, my complete history from the past 5 years. Every address, every job, every hospital visit with my mother. Anton's people built this in 3 days. You think changing your name again will help? He'll find you in a week, and next time, I won't be there to run interference. I sank onto the couch, defeated. So what's the solution? The solution is we stop running and start fighting back. Everett sat across from me, his posture shifting to something more calculated. Anton only has power because people are afraid of him. If we show him that coming after you comes with cost he's not willing to pay. You're talking about war. I'm talking about ending a threat. His eyes met mine, storm gray and absolutely certain. Your father died protecting me. I won't dishonor that by letting his daughter live in fear, because I was too cautious to do what's necessary. What's necessary meaning someone dies. Someone who's already chosen to die by threatening what I'm sworn to protect. Everett leaned forward. I'm not asking your permission, but I'm telling you what's coming. Anton won't stop until he's stopped, and I have the resources, the people, and the motivation to make sure he doesn't get another chance to hurt you or your mother. The weight of his conviction pressed against my chest like physical force. This man had spent 15 years preparing for the moment he could repay a debt. And now that moment had arrived. He wouldn't be deterred by my discomfort with his methods. I don't want anyone to die because of me, I said quietly. No one's dying because of you. They're dying because they made a choice to threaten innocent people. His voice softened slightly. I know this isn't the life you chose, but it's the life your father's sacrifice bought you. And I intend to make damn sure that sacrifice wasn't wasted. After he left, I stood at the window again, watching the city pretend to be peaceful. Somewhere out there, Anton Volkov was planning his next move. And somewhere closer, Everett Crane was planning to end him, and I was caught between them. A debt made flesh, carrying the weight of my father's final 3 seconds. The call came at 2:47 a.m. I knew because I'd been awake, staring at the ceiling of my expensive prison, thinking about my father's letters. About the man who'd written about teaching me to drive, who'd died before I'd ever sat behind a wheel of a car. Temperance. Everett's voice was controlled, but I heard the urgency beneath it. Don't panic. Your mother is safe. Those 4 words told me everything. If she was safe, it meant she'd been in danger. If he needed to tell me not to panic, something had happened that should make me panic. What happened? Anton's people tried to access the facility. They didn't get past the front desk, but they tried. A pause. We're moving her. Now. Irina is already on her way to you. Moving her where? Somewhere he can't reach. I'll explain when you get here. The line went dead. I was dressed in 2 minutes, had my bag packed in 3. By the time Irina knocked, I was standing by the door with my heart hammering against my ribs. The drive took 40 minutes through empty streets. Irina drove faster than usual, her attention split between the road and the rearview mirror, checking for tails, making sure no one followed us to wherever we were going. We ended up at a private airfield on the outskirts of the city. A small jet waited on the tarmac, stairs already lowered. Everett stood at the base, dressed in dark clothes that made him look dangerous in a way his usual suits didn't. Behind him, a medical team was loading equipment into the plane's cabin. Your mother's already on board, he said as I approached. Sedated for the transfer. Dr. Chen is with her. Where are we going? Montana. I have a property there. Isolated, secure, off any grid Anton's people might monitor. He gestured toward the plane. It's equipped as a mobile medical unit. Your mother can continue treatment there without interruption. For how long? Until it's safe to come back. Or until you decide you'd rather stay. His expression was carefully neutral. The choice is yours. Some choice. Go with you. Or watch my mother die because Anton's men reach her first. Yes. No apology in his voice. That's exactly the choice. I'm sorry it's not better. I climbed the stairs without responding. Inside, the plane was configured with medical equipment on one side and comfortable seating on the other. Mom lay on a stretcher, breathing steadily, IV drips attached to both arms. Dr. Chen sat beside her, monitoring vitals on a tablet. She's stable, the doctor said when she saw me. The transfer went smoothly. We'll have her set up in the Montana facility within 5 hours. 5 hours to where? A private medical compound outside of Missoula, formerly a luxury rehabilitation center, now owned by Mr. Crane, and repurposed for situations like this. Dr. Chen's voice was professional, matter of fact. I'll be staying there with your mother for the duration of her treatment. You're coming with us? Mr. Crane made it worth my while. She smiled slightly. Plus, the case is interesting. Your mother's responding better to the treatment than I expected. I'd like to see it through. The plane took off as the sun was rising, turning the sky the color of bruises. I sat across from my mother's stretcher, watching her chest rise and fall with mechanical regularity. Everett took the seat beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Still expensive, still clean, still a reminder that he came from a world where problems were solved with money and force in equal measure. Tell me the truth, I said. What happened at the facility? Anton sent 4 men, professional, armed. They tried to bribe their way past security first. When that didn't work, they attempted force. 2 security guards were injured, non-fatally. The men were detained and are currently being questioned by people who are very good at getting information. Questioned. You mean tortured. I mean questioned. His voice was flat. Whether that questioning is pleasant is determined by how cooperative they are. And then what? What happens to them after you get your information? Everett was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. Then they disappear. And Anton Volkov learns that there are consequences to threatening what I protect. You're going to kill them. I'm going to make sure they can't hurt anyone again. He met my gaze steadily. If that makes me a monster in your eyes, I can live with that. What I can't live with is letting your mother die because I was too civilized to do what's necessary. We flew in silence after that. Below us, the country spread out in geometric patterns of farmland and forest. From up here, everything looked peaceful, organized, safe. From up here, you couldn't see the violence that men like Everett and Anton inflicted on each other in the name of power and debt and revenge. The Montana facility was exactly what Dr. Chen had described, a sprawling complex built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by forest and accessible only by a single secured road. It looked like a luxury resort. It felt like a fortress. Your mother will have the entire East Wing, Everett said as we toured the facility. Medical staff on call 24/7. Equipment that rivals any hospital in the country. Dr. Chen has full autonomy over treatment decisions. And I'll be where? Wherever you want. There are private accommodations if you want space. Or you can stay in your mother's wing if you prefer to be close. He paused outside a large window overlooking the forest. This isn't a prison. Temperance. It's protection. It's isolation. Temporary isolation that keeps you alive. He turned to face me. Anton made his choice when he sent men with guns to a medical facility. Now I'm making mine. You and your mother stay here until Anton is no longer capable of threatening you, however long that takes. And what are you going to do? What your father would expect me to do. Protect his family at any cost. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Mom's treatment continued under Dr. Chen's careful supervision. The new protocols were working. Her color improved. Her energy returned in small increments. We read Dad's letters together, shared memories of the life we'd thought we'd lost when he died. He would have liked Everett, Mom said one afternoon. We were sitting in her room, sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked pristine forest. Gregory always respected people who kept their word, even when it cost them. It's costing us, I pointed out. Our freedom, our choices. Our lives, Mom corrected. He's keeping us alive, Temperance. That's not nothing. Everett visited every 3 days. He'd fly in from wherever he was handling Anton's threat, spend a few hours reviewing security protocols and checking on Mom's progress, then disappear again. We didn't talk much during these visits. What was there to say? He was doing what he felt obligated to do. I was surviving the consequences. It was on his 4th visit, 3 weeks into our Montana exile, that everything changed. He arrived at midnight, which was unusual. Landed the helicopter himself, which was more unusual. When I met him in the facility's main lobby, unable to sleep, restless with the strange captivity of safety, his expression was harder than I'd ever seen it. It's done, he said simply. Anton is gone. Gone meaning dead, along with the key members of his organization who knew about you. Everett moved to the window, looking out at darkness. The rest of his people are being absorbed into friendlier organizations. The threat is eliminated. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the weight of what he'd done settling onto my shoulders. How many people died? Does it matter? Yes. He turned to face me. 12. Counting Anton. All of them people who were directly involved in planning or executing threats against you and your mother. All of them people who would have continued to be threats if they'd lived. So, you're a mass murderer now. I'm a man who keeps his promises. No anger in his voice, just tired acceptance. Your father saved my life 15 years ago. I've spent every day since then building power specifically so I could protect what he died for. Now I have. If that makes me a monster, so be it. What happens now? I asked. We go back to the city? Pretend the last month didn't happen? Now you decide what you want. Everett moved closer, stopping a few feet away, close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The apartment is yours if you want it. The medical coverage for your mother continues regardless. The protection detail can be as visible or invisible as you prefer. Or you walk away. New city, new name, complete fresh start. I'll make sure no one ever connects you to any of this again. His voice was absolutely serious. You don't owe me anything, Temperance. Your father paid every debt that could ever exist between our families. What happens next is entirely your choice. I looked at this man who had upended my life in the name of honor, who had paid my mother's medical bills without asking, who had moved us to Montana to keep us safe, who had killed 12 people because they'd threatened what he considered his to protect. I want to visit my father's grave, I said finally. The real one, not the empty cemetery plot we went to for 15 years. Something shifted in Everett's expression. Relief, maybe. Or recognition that I wasn't walking away after all. I'll take you tomorrow, he said. It's a few hours from here. Private property. Land I bought specifically to make sure he had a place worth resting. The grave was on a hillside overlooking a valley that looked like something from a postcard. The headstone was simple granite, with just his name and dates. But the location, peaceful, beautiful, permanent, spoke to the care Everett had taken. I come here sometimes, Everett said as we stood beside the grave. Talk to him about what I'm building, what I'm protecting. Ask him if I'm doing this right. What does he say? Nothing, but I like to think he'd understand why I do what I do. I placed flowers on the grave, wildflowers I'd picked on the walk-up. I'm not going to run, I said. From you or the life you're offering. Not because I owe you anything, but because it's what Dad would have wanted. For me to be safe, for Mom to survive, for his sacrifice to mean something. Thank you. But I need something from you. Everett turned to face me, waiting. I need you to let me be part of it. The legitimate businesses, the foundations, whatever you're building that isn't about violence and power, let me help. Let Dad's death be about more than just debts and protection. Let it be about building something better. He studied me for a long moment, then extended his hand. Partners? I took his hand. His grip was warm, solid, certain. Partners. We stood on that hillside as the sun set, two people connected by a debt that could never be fully repaid. My father had died protecting Everett. Everett had spent 15 years honoring that sacrifice. And now I would spend my future making sure that chain of protection and honor continued. Not because I had to, but because it was right. Because some debts are paid not in money or blood, but in living well. In protecting others the way we'd been protected. In making sure that sacrifice and honor meant something more than just violence in the dark. The web had closed around me, but instead of feeling trapped, I felt anchored, connected to something larger than myself, to my father's memory, to my mother's survival, to a future built on debt paid in full. And as we walked down from that hillside together, I realized that freedom sometimes looked less like escape and more like acceptance, less like running and more like standing your ground with someone who would never let you fall. My father had saved Everett's life in 3 seconds. Everett had spent 15 years earning the right to be worth that sacrifice. Now it was my turn to decide what I was worth, and what I would build with the freedom his protection had bought me. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. But this time, I was writing it myself.